1,300,000,000, 1,400,000,000, 1,500,000,000, 1,600,000,000, 1,700,000,000, 1,800,000,000, 1,900,000,000, 2,000,000,000, 2.1 billion, 2.2 billion, 2.5 billion, 3 billion, 3.6 billion, 4 billion, 5 billion, 6 billion, 7 billion, 8 billion, 9 billion, 10 billion, more than 1, 10 billion and 1,000, 10 billion and 1 million, 11 billion, 12 billion, 13 billion, 14 billion, 15 billion, 16 billion, 17 billion, 18 billion, 19 billion, 20 billion, 21 billion, 22 billion, 23 billion, 24 billion, 25 billion, 26 billion, 27 billion, 28 billion, 29 billion, 30 billion, 31 billion, 32 billion, 33 billion, 35 billion, fingers are magic, 36 billion, 38 billion, 40 billion, 45 billion, 46 billion, 49 billion, 50 billion, 55 billion, 58 billion, 60 billion, 64 billion, 7 billion, 80 billion, 81 billion, 90 billion, 97 billion, 104 million, but not official. 100 billion, 100 billion and 1, 100 billion and 1,000, 100 billion and 1 million, 100 billion, 101 billion. 102 billion, 103 billion, 104 billion, 105 billion, 108 billion, 110 billion, 120 billion, 130 billion, 140 billion, 150, 160 billion, 170 billion, 180 billion, 190 billion, 199 billion, 200 billion, 201 billion, 204 billion, 210 billion, 220 billion, 250 billion, 280 billion, 300 billion, 330 million, 360 billion, 400 billion, 404 billion, 460 billion, May, 437 billion, May, 444 billion, May, 409 billion, 500 billion, 500 billion, 500,000, 500 billion, 500 million, 505 billion, 550 billion, 600 billion, 630 billion, 640 billion, 700 billion, 800 billion, 810 7 billion, 100 billion, 800 billion, 810 billion, 900 billion, 1 trillion, 100 billion, 1 trillion and 1. This is how much will it? 1 trillion plus 1. 1 trillion and 1,000. 1 trillion, 1 million. 1 trillion and 10 million, 100, 1 trillion, 1 trillion, 1 billion, 1 trillion, 10 billion, 1 trillion, 100 billion, 1 trillion, 200 billion, 1 trillion, 300 billion, 1 trillion, 400 billion, 1 trillion, 500 billion, 1 trillion, 600 billion, 1 trillion, 700 billion, 1 trillion, 800 billion, 1 trillion, 900 billion, trillion, 2.1, 2 trillion, 100 billion, 2 trillion, 200 billion, 2 trillion, 500 billion, 3 trillion, 3 trillion, 600 billion, 4 trillion, 4 trillion, 500 billion, 5 trillion, 6 trillion, 7 trillion, 8 trillion, 9 trillion, 10 trillion, 10 trillion and 1, 10 trillion and 1,000, 20 trillion and 1 million, 20 trillion and 1 billion, 11 trillion, 12 trillion, 13 trillion, stop flying, you're 13 trillion, 14 trillion, 15 trillion, 16 trillion, 17 trillion, 18 trillion, 19 trillion, 20 trillion, 21 trillion, 22 trillion, 25 trillion, 30 trillion, 40 trillion, 40 trillion, 50 trillion, 50 trillion and 5 million, 38 trillion, 60 trillion, 70 trillion, 80 trillion, 90 trillion, 97 trillion and 104 billion, 97 trillion, 104 billion, 100 trillion, 110 trillion, 120 trillion, 130 trillion, 160 trillion, 200 trillion, 250 trillion, 300 trillion, 400 trillion, 500 trillion, 600 trillion, 700 trillion, 800 trillion, 800 trillion, 900 trillion, 999 trillion, 999 trillion, 999 billion, 999 million, 999,999. 1 quadrillion, 1 quadrillion, 100 trillion, 1 quadrillion, 200 trillion, 1 quadrillion, 300 trillion, 1 quadrillion, 600 trillion, 2 quadrillion, 2 quadrillion, 500 trillion, 3 quadrillion, 4 quadrillion, 5 quadrillion, 5 quadrillion, 50 million, 6 quadrillion, 7 quadrillion, 8 quadrillion, 9 quadrillion, 10 quadrillion. Teleport to more than 10 quadrillion. 11 quadrillion, 12 quadrillion, 13 quadrillion, 16 quadrillion, 20 quadrillion, 25 quadrillion, 30 quadrillion, 4 quadrillion, 40 quadrillion, 50 quadrillion, 60 quadrillion, 100 quadrillion, 100 quadrillion, 100 quadrillion, 100 quadrillion, 1 quintillion, quadrillion, 1 quintillion, 100 quadrillion, 2 quintillion, 3 quintillion, 4 quintillion, 5 quintillion, 6 quintillion, 10 quintillion, 20 quintillion, 30 quintillion, 60 quintillion, 100 quintillion, 200 quintillion, 1 sextillion, 2 sextillion, 3 sextillion, 10 sextillion, 100 sextillion, 1 septillion, 2 septillion, 10 septillion, 1 octillion, 2 octillion, 1 nonillion, 1 decillion, 1 undecillion, 1 geodecillion, 1 tridecillion, 1 quadrillion, 1 quintillion, 1 sextillion, 1 septendecillion, 1 octodecillion, 1 novemdecillion, 1 virgintillion, 1 unvirgintillion, 1 jovintillion, 1 quinvirgintillion, 1 triquintillion, Google, 1 quadrigintillion, 1 quinquagintillion, 1 sexagentillion, 1 septuagentillion, 1 octogentillion, 1 nonagentillion, 1 centillion, 1 millionillion, Googolplex, question mark, glitch, Googolplexing, glitch, Googolplexing times 1 million, glitch, Googolplexing times 1 billion, glitch, Googolplexing times 1 trillion.